nerds?
Okay, the question was posed because I'm talking about the importance of value and volume, right? Contrast um, is what comes out of value in your composition, meaning that you place bright colors next to dark colors and it gives contrast. The way you then move that contrast and place it on the model gives what we call volume. Does that make sense? So if I put a bright color next to a dark color, it's going to stand out in very broad contrast and it's going to draw your eye to it. Your eye is attracted to contrast. So the place where bright and dark colors come together is the place where your eye goes first because there's something happening there. Light, when it acts that way, is doing something cool, as opposed to when it goes long space between your bright and dark color over a smoother surface. The whole surface can be interesting, but your eye is not drawn to any single point on it until it reaches the point of contrast. So you being able to manipulate light and dark and put them in the right combination to match the shape of the model, which we have very luckily in sculptures, we already know the shape because it's in our hand. You can imagine how much more difficult this is when painting a flat canvas. You have to create the shape. So when drawing and painting on a flat canvas and then trying to make something look three-dimensional, your knowledge of all this has to be even greater because you have to create it on your own. Here, the shape is already done for us. It's why zenithal highlighting makes so much sense, because you can take this model, do a quick zenithal highlight on it with white, and now the zenithal shows you where the bright and the dark colors need to go. The bright colors from the sun hit from this direction, and the dark colors hit from this direction. And then you can take a snapshot of that model where the shadows and all go, and then refer back to it to know you're placing your dark and bright colors correctly to match the shape of the model. So that's a great learning tool. But the question was asked, okay, how do I gain the ability to make material look different when I only have two colors? Because I brought up the idea that we use color a lot to distinguish what each material is on the model. I'll paint the armor with a metallic silver. Of course, now it's metal. It looks like metal. I'll paint the boots with brown because boots in brown means leather. And the brain and the eye coordinate that story for you, but you may not be doing yourself a service by painting with the same brush stroke for each of those, because if we took a black and white photo of your model, it would all look exactly the same. One of the tools that many painters use as they get more training and develop their skills is to take a photo of your model and strip all the color out of it, make it black and white, and see if you can still tell the difference between material on your model. So how are you going to do that? Texture. Texture is created out of the ability of your brush strokes to create contrast in various methods to draw the eye to it, to form a recognition of soft versus hard versus furry versus slick, right? Versus dry and cracked. You can do all of that with just your brush stroke. Okay, so we'll do some of that here. Coal titanium white, coal black. Two colors, bingo bango. So I'm going to use a big brush here. Since this model is already painted in black, you can barely, it's our black spray primer, so you can barely tell that it has any details on it at all. And I'm just going to do a mix of, like, we'll call it 75% black, 25% white to get a dark gray here, okay? And I'm going to start with the jeans. We'll just paint this on the pants first. And this is a base coat, so I'm just going to use big sloppy strokes here just to get coverage. And then I'll add a little bit more white. This is just standard layering, just so I can get color on here, right? Because again, we want to form the base volumes for this. And by doing so, I'm going to, do the standard, like for fabric, I'm just going to catch the high spots of the fabric here. He's got like black denim pants on, maybe. Okay. And then as we go and brighten this up, we're going to want to put some texture on here, right? I want to deviate from my standard brush stroke as we go, so that as I go to my brighter colors, and this is still a very dark gray that I'm using as I mix. We would call this maybe 50-50 at this point. But now, I meant to switch brushes from my big base coat brush. That's a number 6. That's not really great for doing fine detail. Go back to my number 3. Right, and now as I go, I might want to give like a burlap sack kind of a texture to it. So as I do my highlights, I'm going to start doing tighter lines instead of painting in a big broad stroke that goes down this fold in the fabric. I'm using a bunch of very tight lines to start giving it a texture like that, as opposed to just like with the base coat brush, I just went slop and went down. Now I'm going across it so that I can form some contrast, right? And I'll just do this. Very fine lines. gives me some texture, right? We can continue to do that across all of our highlight areas as we see fit. But I want to use that small kind of staccato, if you will, brushstroke, something that's just a bunch of very fine lines stacked next to each other. This is just one texture. You could do stippling here. You could determine what you want. But the idea is to set up in the viewer's mind what this fabric looks and feels like. Because you can imagine when you see something that has all these little lines in it, you can imagine what it feels like to run your finger across it, can't you? It would have like a, like little divots in it, like very, like I said, sackcloth, you can imagine, right? It's going to have a texture that has a feel. This is why we talk about feel and depth and all of that. You can put textures on a model that the person looking at it will know what it feels like because they've experienced something like this before. Maybe they like it, maybe they don't. You can use texture to evoke a lot of reaction where color can't do that necessarily. Where color on brown boots might say, oh yeah, that looks like leather. Does it really? No, because when you look at leather, it's not just brown, right? So you can see I've started this micro texture on the jeans. So that's one thing that I always start doing to define my materials. I call this, you'll hear me say material focus a lot. I will choose, especially when doing cloth, what the material wants to look like. Now, I will add more white to this mix to get a brighter gray. So we're mixing our colors up, going up in value. So my next layer has to be brighter than my last layer, or why am I painting it? And then now I do the same thing. I come in and now I've done these little texture lines. Now I want to make them even smaller and stick to where my highlights go. So I may only do the top edge of that one. Think in terms of how you would highlight this just normally and only put this texture in the areas you would highlight like that. And then switch over here, do the same thing. Maybe I'm not going to highlight up in here because it's under the crotch. So maybe I get light where I come out this way. Like that. Same thing here, more shadow underneath, and then I kind of highlight as I come out of the crotch area of the leg, and I get my highlights like that. Top of the thigh here, just follow the same direction I did with my other highlights, and then just kind of taper it off so I still get some contrast. And I can add.
So going off of what you're doing here, Jason, so knowing that light is the more important aspect, would you say someone shouldn't rely too much on zenithal shading / base coating?
So there you go. Now you have highlighted jeans that have texture in black and white. Now I can go brighter if I want these to be shiny. I can do whatever I need to do here. As a matter of fact, I probably need to bring, maybe on this side, I need to bring this highlight just a little further to match the other side. But you get my drift, right? So now we've got a little bit of material focus. That's what the jeans feel like in black and white, okay? So not only have I mixed the black and the white together just on brightness alone, because I don't have hue, right? So I mix it on brightness alone, so I get some volume here. You can see the dark underneath of the folds. You can see the brightness on the top of the folds. You can see the texture because that's where my highlight is. And I get something that feels like maybe a waxy pair of jeans. If you've ever worn jeans that have that kind of waxy feel because they've been worn so much. Feels like that. Doesn't have a super amount of shine, but it has enough. Now, I have metal handcuffs here. So how do I use black and white to change that? I only have the same two colors, so the only way to do it is texture. So again, I can take some white, mix it in to get a dark gray. So again, call it 75-25, black to white here. And we'll start our base color this way. And my base coats, I typically don't put texture in my base coats. You can. If you're doing brighter colors, you might want to start your texturing with your base coat. I typically start with the next color or the third color with texture, because that's where you can see it. But you want to start your texture before you get to your brightest color. Otherwise, you don't create any contrast that's recognizable. Now, metal, as opposed to fabric, has a tendency to be smoother. Now, metal can also be very coarse, and you could do this same hatched texture on the metal, and it would look like it was all scratched and dinged up. But since I've used scratching on the jeans, I don't want to use scratching on the metal, because why? It would look the same though, wouldn't it? If I use the same brush stroke on the metal, even though I want the metal to be scratchy, sometimes you make decisions based on, I don't want this metal to look scratchy because it'll look like my jeans. I chose hatching, this little bitty line texture on my jeans, so I can't use that on anything else that isn't a material similar to jeans. Now, luckily, there's a ton of brush strokes that you can do. Stippling, dry brushing, all sorts of things create different textures. So you can reuse textures. You can make, this is fine hatching. You can do very broad hatching, very thick hatching will feel different. Stippling will feel more like wool. Stippling tends to make things look soft. So you have all sorts of brush strokes that you can use. So we paint that on there. Then I add a little bit more white to my black. Same thing again. I only have these two colors, so I'm stuck going through the exact same palette that I used on the jeans. Right, but now I want to think about how light reacts on metal, and so I'll brighten up the areas that face my light source. Like so.
So Rav says, so zenithal can be a nice guideline, but not really show through the layers at the end.
Mix a little bit more white in there and just keep stair-stepping this up a little bit here. Again, now I'm not doing any textured brush strokes at all. I don't want texture on the metal. Now we're just doing smooth brush strokes. And then I've done, you know, the gray to the point to where now I just jump to white because it's non-metallic metal. So there's no more mix here. We just want to go to pure white. Or bright gray. You might have it be not pure white. Right? And then we just want to grab the uppermost shine areas on this. And there's material differentiation with just black and white. Same colors, right? Looks like I use other colors. Those blue jeans almost look like they could have a little bit of blue in them. Because how bright I went on the metal versus how dull I kept the jeans. So now with the same black and white, I have now shown you what's metal and what is not metal. And I could continue to do this with leather by using a different texture. You know, cotton, if I wanted to have his chest rig made out of something else, the metal on his arm, fur, hair, you just keep using different textures. Bingo. Handcuffs and denim. All done with the exact same colors. No color distinguishing factors at all. I can't use blue for the jeans. I can't use metallic paint for the metal. But I have now shown you without any question in your mind, one is fabric and one is metal. Just by using different brush strokes. These are not the Blood Angels bits I ordered. The Blood Angels don't eat beans.
They're pre-painted.
They are pre-painted.
Decals.